This video is about change of direction, both being able to do it well and do it fast. There are two main sections to it. The first is about biomechanical factors that help you to change direction faster. So they've been correlated in a research paper that I'll link below to actually help with speed and change of direction. And the second section is going to talk about the footwork that we can use to change direction and which ones I think help more in certain situations or based on your athletic profile. For the biomechanical factors, one of the main ones they found really helped to correlate with faster change of direction was the strength and power from your ankle, so from mostly your calf musculature. So they found that the stronger you were through it and the more powerful, so the more you're able to generate strength with speed, the faster your change of direction would be. The next body factor that they brought into it was your pelvis tilt. So if you think of the pelvis as a seesaw, we don't really want to see much of a dip on one side or the other. So the less of that there was, the faster the change of direction. Third factor would be how well you can rotate through the trunk. So lateral rotation of the thorax. So that really helps to initiate your turn into the direction you want to go, and then the legs can follow. And the last factor was your ground contact time. So the shorter the contact time with your foot on the ground, the faster you could be to take off. You may need to consider though that if you're too quick with your feet, you're not giving enough time for that hip to extend and to actually get a really good push off. So there's a little bit of a trade-off, but it would be quite context dependent in the game as well.
The basic phases of a change of direction include needing to slow down or decelerate, plant, then change direction and re-accelerate. We also need to factor in acceleration into the turn.
So there are three cutting maneuvers that I'm going to describe, and these are from a paper as well. The first one is the side step, which is like a jab step, if you know that term as well. Basically, if you want to go left, you're going to plant with your right foot and push off that to drive you in that direction. The second one is a crossover step. So if you want to go left, you're actually going to plant with your left foot and use that as the driving force to go into the left direction. And the last one is a split step, and that is where you actually do a little bounce on 2 feet before you decide which direction you're going to go. Which turn is best for you is going to depend on you and the context. So when you're actually using your change of direction. It'll also depend on how fast you're going into the turn and how big an angle you want to come out of it. So the bigger the angle, this kind of slower you want to go into it actually in order to be quite accurate with your change direction. But in order to shake off a defender, for example, you may need to really accelerate hard into it and just take your time coming out of it to get the right direction. For things like the crossover cut, they're not so good over greater than, say, about 45-degree angle, so straight ahead is 0, out about 45 degrees. I would say I wouldn't really be looking to use that except for lateral movements. So when you're actually just trying to go side to side and not necessarily commit one way, then I think that crossover step is really useful. When I was doing the cutting examples outside, I found that that crossover step was really interesting. I didn't need to slow down as much. So I'll go through one of the clips of myself as well and show you what my body was naturally doing. It's not something I would normally use in a game in that scenario, but if I was basically doing quite a narrow cut forward, it was quite useful for making me feel like I didn't need to slow down too much. The jab step is really quite versatile. You can use it on defense, on offense, to get around players in any sport as well. The split step then is an interesting one. I don't think you can go into it too quickly, but extremely good for not letting the defender know too early which direction you're going to go. Very good for things like rugby, where you really need to get around people and choose your gap based on potentially what the defender is giving you in that last second, rather than necessarily anticipating your move before you've seen what the defense is doing.
Let's have a look at this side step. So I'm coming into it from just a short acceleration, so not too fast. Then I decelerate. You can tell that by the way I'm becoming more upright with my torso. And as I plant that foot, I am sitting into it a bit. Hips aren't quite as low as the knees. That's okay. I don't really need them to be in this situation because I'm not coming from a massive speed. And my shin angle is leaning towards the direction that I want to go. And from there, I give a good big push out through that leg. You can see my high left leg, the high inside leg. That's because I want to give that right leg enough time to really generate a lot of force and push out. So my first step in the direction I'm trying to change into is nice and strong and gets me far. I found it interesting comparing these two, the side step and the crossover step. Mostly what I'd like to point out here is how I approach the plant leg, so the penultimate step to the plant leg. So for the side step, my plant and push leg is the right leg, and for the crossover step, it's the left leg. So here you'll see for the crossover step, I actually take a large step, a large penultimate step. For the side step though, I'm taking more kind of a smaller step, choppy feet type approach going into it. The larger penultimate step is very similar to what we see when we're taking off on a one-leg jump. So I believe it's really helpful for getting your centre of mass lower, and therefore that's how you can come out of the turn faster than doing a side step over shorter or smaller angles. They do look really similar, but it's the way the forces are going through the leg, it's the actual push part of it that is different and can result in different speeds. The loading is different through the legs. Specifically, the knee is looked at a lot, and there is a greater valgus force in side step maneuvers compared with crossover step, but you just need to decide which one your body can handle and which you can do at speed for the sport that you need to perform in. I had a few questions sent in before I was making this video, so I'm going to answer them now. Going back to the point where there is an angle velocity trade-off, if you are making a move that you don't really intend to use, you want to go into it a little bit slower. You don't want to go all gung-ho into it necessarily, but you do want to make it look like you're going into it quite quickly. And then when you're changing direction, you won't have to slow yourself down as much. So if you take a really sudden first step, the defender may really bite on that, then you don't need to necessarily accelerate your hardest out of that before planting and turning and going the other way where you actually really want to go. If you're trying to get them to bite on one side more than the other, I would use the split step, as I was saying before. This has been shown to just throw off the defender a bit more. They can't guess as easily which way you want to go because you have both your feet parallel, so it gives you more options. That'll work well as long as you're not stuck in a place where it's very obvious where your next move is going to be, but at the same time people can be psyched out, so you can use that to sort of plant and shift your body weight, see what they bite on, and then choose your direction when you're ready. This was covered a bit earlier, but you really want to give yourself time to get a big drive out of that plant leg, and it helps to bring the inside knee up high, but really that's also a reaction from you trying to push really hard from that plant leg. So let yourself get into that full triple extension. You also want to make sure you twist into that direction and lean forward. Lean your shin angles should be going towards the direction you want to change into, and also your torso should be leaning in that direction as well. Swivel your head first, the rest of the body will follow better that way too. Okay, so for this one you need good training, and all of the biomechanical factors listed earlier in the video are all good training as well. Good performance, good training, rehab, they're actually all working towards the same thing and work along the same spectrum. So make sure you have really good ankle and foot stability and really good hip pelvic stability, and in the sagittal plane, so forward back, that's what the knee has to be able to control. Everything else is the responsibility of the hip and the foot with regards to the forces that go into the knee. You need to have really good eccentric control, so that means being able to slow yourself down essentially, and the muscles don't mind being under load as they're being stretched. So in particular we're talking about the quads there around the knee joint, for example. You may want to do more of a forward lean into your decelerations and do a lot more steps slowing down as well, because that'll dissipate the force through the knees over a longer period rather than trying to do a really hard jab step. You're not going to be able to defeat the laws of friction. So footwear is going to be key. Make sure you're not wearing the wrong footwear for the job. Next, I think about don't rush. You need time to be able to steady yourself and get a really good push off. And if you're moving too quickly, that's harder, I think, on slippery surface. You really need to get yourself low, ground down into the ground, and then actually push off. So the stronger you are in that, in terms of your brakes, your isometric capacity at the middle point, and then your ability to re-accelerate is going to be more helpful as well. I think I alluded to this earlier, but if you're going quite fast into a turn or change of direction, you're probably going to need a good few more small steps, as you're saying, rather than being able to plan straight away and go. The other factor to consider is the angle you're going to change direction into. So the bigger the angle, the more likely you're going to need to have smaller steps going into it in order to be able to control that big turn. Whereas when you're going between 0 and 90 degrees, say, it's a lot easier to do that plant and go effectively. But that will totally depend on your strength. So the stronger you are, the more you can do a plant and go in certain situations. It'll be easier for you, and the kind of weaker you are, say, the less capable your muscles are of braking, then you're going to need to take more smaller steps, which is a greater advantage, is context dependent again, I would say. So you may want to do a few stutter steps to see what the defense is doing before you commit one way or another, or to see if you can get them off balance before you commit to the direction you always planned on going. I find a really good plant and go, though, just surprises defenders who aren't looking at you, for example. So if they suddenly look around to see the play, then that's a really good time to just do a plant and go. In saying all that, if you're doing lots of small steps into a turn, that's fine if it's happening naturally, but I never really cue it with people. Your body will figure it out. So if you really just try to go as fast as you can, you'll see what you naturally do, and then you can work on how you think you can be more efficient based on some feedback, looking at yourself, getting a coach. Coming back after this long break this pandemic has induced on us, it's going to depend very much on the people in question how to return to training more safely. Some factors to consider are the ages involved, including like chronological, biological, and their training age. So biological is basically saying are they pre-adolescent, adolescent, or adult, and training age is have they got much training experience with strength and conditioning, and then chronological is just the number of years of age they are. Then the detraining time. So some people have been keeping up fitness over the pandemic and some people haven't. So that's really important to factor in. And then whether they're doing it as a group or an individual. So groups can get very competitive, which may be inappropriate for some people if they haven't been working, whereas other people in the group have been. Individuals, a lot easier to tailor specifically to that person. And then they're less likely to go off and do too much too soon. Then their injury status coming into their training. Some people, even though they've had a long break, might still be carrying some issues, and their injury history. So what are they more likely to re-injure in this phase? If I'm talking about working with a standard adult GAA team, for example, then I would be starting sessions off, so conditioning sessions off, or training sessions if you want to work on this stuff, with the technical work, so with your skills work where the mind is fresh, the body is fresh, so it's going to learn it a lot better. So I do about 20 minutes, sub-maximal at the start, and then slowly increase it from week to week. So after that, then if you're doing your cardio, like tempo runs, for example, you would do those after doing this technical or skills work. Then to build tolerance in acceleration and deceleration gradually, you want to do that both in the gym and on the field. So again, not starting too high, but you can go to about, when I say not too high, like I'd be 70-80% or around that area would be good for most people. You want to work on your pelvis and ankle stability too, both in the gym and if you're doing hops and jumps around the pitch as well for some of your work there, that's great. And I like the 10% golden rule, so basically from week to week, don't increase volume or intensity by more than 10%. So depending on how much time, you don't want to do more than 10% time the next week, say, or number of reps. Or if you're going at 70% one week, you can go to 80% the next week, but don't be hopping up to 100% straight away from there.